we don't see the pictures. And that's a bit of a problem, because I now want to talk about new fields of intermediality. And what you should see on the left-hand side is the cover of my handbook of intermediality from 2015. And on the right-hand side, Bruns et altera, handbook of the Palgrave handbook of intermediality, which is much bigger, and that came out in 24. And I brought a few slides. We're not going into the slides, just maybe that you read the bold parts, you know. Yeah, what? Yeah, because there will be more pictures and text image without. Let's see whether there are pictures. No, they're all gone. They're all gone. Did you take that over, or do you need this?
No, I need them. Sorry for people in the room and online. So we're going to shift from the PowerPoint version to the PDF version so that you can get the images.
Yeah, that would be good.
Checking there's nobody in the waiting room, so this is good news. Okay, just give us a couple of minutes here. The other option would be to use your computer, but we couldn't hook up.
Yeah, we couldn't hook it up.
Okay.
So we go to see again.
Okay.
It's funny because it worked before.
Am I still online with people? Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Okay. Samsung.
See.
So we're in the
Lecture 1. And here we have to find the latest.
new one.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay. And
that should be the PDF. Yes.
I open the seminar one as well. No seminar. No PDF. Okay. Right. And let me try and share this with online. Okay. So I'm looking for a PDF. You might have to leave the same.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Not intermediaries. Then the new one. Yeah, it doesn't exactly show which is. Yes.
Okay. Does that work?
Yes. Let's check. Yes,
it's working.
There you go. Here are the pictures. Yes. So from Rippl to Brun and Altera, very extended. I'm sure you have that in the library. So that's a new one. Now, what I really want to talk about today is my impressions where the field is going right now. And I'm keen to hear, you know, where you see new fields of intermediality research. I'm sure you have different ideas. So I have a few slides that cover what you see here on this slide, and we just go on. And I took some of the cues, of course, also from your homepage, because I think you're doing really interesting thing, from book history and intermediality to all kind of other inter and transmedial afterlives of literary classics and bestsellers. I could name quite a few of your projects, and so taking cues from your work, and I feed them into what I think is interesting, and we will hear more. Now, these are the big names, examples from Ekphrasis as one category of intermedial work. And so what I want you to look at here is really the bottom, because I think many people these days are super interested in functions of intermediality work. So how can intermedial works of art affect us? What kind of ethical questions do they raise? What kind of is their heuristic use? What's their ecological value? How do they, what kind of socio-political and cultural critical work do they do? Because they do something. And this also means, of course, that we all believe that literature and cultural phenomena have a performative power, right? Anna Karenina, when we read it and we cry, then the tears are a social fact. They are not fictional, right? It does something with us. So functions, I think, are really important. And now it doesn't move. Let me see here. Now, this is a category that I think is super important, namely intermediality and affect studies. And affective intermediality is a term that was introduced by Agnes Petter. Those of you who work in film might know this term. She is looking into films that refer also to other media, and how kind of film intermedial aesthetic features, how they kind of establish a what she called passage to physical reality. So what it does also with our body. This kind of close interest of what these films do. Do they produce what kind of social facts and what kind of affects? And I might, I mean, you know this, but from classical antiquity, we also know that Ekphrasis, for instance, you know, early forms of description, they also were supposed to affect the listeners. Okay, so this is one thing that is important, I think, and I have to rush now a bit through the slides because we're losing time. Ekphrasis research is really developing. It's going on and on and on. It's so exciting. There are new books like the one here by Sophie Belluli. She also works on intermediality and affect, but also how the personal and the political go together. Then I just spotted another one, a PhD thesis that is about to be published by Sylvia Kohl. She's talking about material ekphrasis, so trying to bring new materialism together with ekphrasis studies. All right, and here are a few slides. I'm sure you know these Routledge companions. One has been out on literature and art, and there is a lot on ekphrasis and ekphrastic encounters. But I would like to stop here for a moment because this is was a PhD student of mine, Malaika Sutter, and her work is interesting because she works with textile materials. With textile materials, and text intermediality has often to do with visuality and text, and she is looking into tactile and it's again, Malaika worked on that. It's called the Tiny Bricks Project by Diana Weimer. And this is all about Donald Trump and his nice, well, what he has to say to us, especially when he addresses women. And it's a project that started in 2018. And what's interesting for us is really she's using, you know, embroidery work by her grandmother, and she's using them and with stitches represents, well, the messages of President Trump, like here, grab him by the pussy, or this one, I am a very stable genius, which he also posted. But this idea of, you know, having something on Twitter or now X, and then it's turned into embroidery, and then it's photographed, and then it goes on the internet because it's a digital project by the artist. Wonderful example of remediations that happen. All right, another field I want to briefly touch upon is political intermediality. And since we are short on time, I just want to refer back to a conference that Natalie mentioned that we had in Berne in 23, and Natalie's work on Banyan is just a very important piece of research that really goes so well under the topic of political intermediality. In these harsh times, you know, when democracies have problems more and more, I mean, all of these interventions are political in a way. Yeah. Also the way, I have a quote here from Rancière, also the way Rancière would understand it. But I think it would be good if we thought more along these lines. What kind of interventions? How is the meaning making? What can intermediality add to the world we live in, right? So I think that's coming up, and there is more work to do because, you know, publicly kind of circulating ideas, ideologies, stereotypes, they really have the potential to make readers see what they didn't see, to make the invisible visible, as Rancière so nicely puts it, yeah? To try to bring something out to shift our epistemological frames, right? The way we normally understand things, to push that. And this is a super important task. Then, I mean, I'm sure you know your Rancière. We don't read that, but can go back to that in the seminar. Another important field, and that's so very impressive. You know, there are fields that have grown together, like intermediate studies started in the 90s, post-colonial studies, also, you know, late 80s, 90s. But they have not come together. Maybe it's a bit like book history and intermediality. But all of so many post-colonial novels, poems, they all work, they refer to visualities, to vision, to images. They describe images. It's about the canon of visual works. It's about reworking the canon, the visual canon. And so, yeah, I think you can do a lot when you have the toolbox that we have as intermediality scholars to kind of, you know, it yields rich results when you look at these texts from that angle. And yeah, this is a slide where you can see quite a few of these texts that I've and others have been working on, poems as well as novels. I'm sure you know quite a few of them. And I don't know, I brought along a short quote from a novel I really like, No Violet Bulawayo, American Zimbabwean or Zimbabwean American contemporary writer. And this novel is full of ekphrasis, full of TV ekphrasis, etc. But here she opens a box in her aunt's house in Detroit, Michigan, Detroit, as she calls it. And she says, it's a painting of a market scene and it's crazy with life and color, people selling things, fruits, vegetables, food stuff, colorful beads and cloths. handbags, belts, animal carvings, just anything you can think of. There's children, women, men, women with babies on their backs, old people, a couple of dogs, a bicycle, everybody and everything alive under a bright blue sky. So this Ekphrasis is super interesting. It not only kind of produces an image of an African market scene, and there's lots of nostalgia. This girl is now with her aunt in Detroit. But I think it's also interesting. There are a lot of things we could discuss, you know, batiks or certain cloths we think that they are typically African. No, they're not. They were introduced by the Dutch. This Ekphrasis also is taking Ekphrasis from the Western world. You know, it's making it transcultural, right? This is a traveling form now. It's still the English language, but it's traveling. It's also doing something important. It's not just Ekphrasis of beautiful Renaissance Dutch paintings, but it's taking Ekphrasis to describe batik or, you know, cloth patterns. So it's kind of, yeah, doing important canonical work, if you like, when you think of ekphrastic examples. Then another example is, of course, Teju Cole. And I bet you all have read or heard of Teju Cole, American photographer, novelist, art historian with a specialization in 17th century Renaissance Dutch painting. Very interesting, very successful American writer. And on the left, you see a novella that he brought out with pictures, photos, black and white, taken by him on a trip to Lagos. And on the right is his latest, shall I say, novel. It's a mixture of genres. In case you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. In both novels, he's dealing with visuality, colonizing topics, you know, what does Ekphrasis do? What does description do? Why do the colonized hate the anthropologists so much who kept describing, mapping the field, describing the foreign? So Ekphrasis can be very cultural critical, but it can also be in the hands of colonizers, you know, and doing a not so good, maybe, political job. But anyway, in both examples, and I'll discuss them, I discussed that in great detail in my fourth lecture. There are wonderful examples. I just click through them here and show you an example like this one. But the text is missing. The ekphrastic text is missing. It used to be there. It must be an old version. We deal with that, right, Natalie? So this is a famous photograph by Cole, and you see he's always putting into his photographs something that we can't see straight through. He's always making sure that our vision is either blurred, or, you know, like here, we have to look through. Now, here, the description is there is a grazing sheep, whatever. But that's not what this animal is doing here. Or let's look at this example here. He's taking a bus ride and tells us, I cannot see her face, so I try, but as she sits down, I crane my neck to see what is printed on the book cover and catch sight of the author's name. What I see makes my heart leap up into my mouth and thrash about like a catfish in a bucket. Michael Ondaatje, my mind runs a monologue as I want the back of her head, as I watch the back of her head for the duration of the journey. Yeah. We see some things in the picture, right? But we don't see exactly what's there. We don't see the back of the head. So there's always these interesting negotiations of what we see on the pictures. And that's his project. Or another example, because some of you, I think, if I remember correctly, also work on travelogues. Here is an example from Tremor, and it's about a Harvard photography professor teaching his students. And he's telling them, you know, white people taught us that the world could be dominated by means of religion and warfare, collected for the sake of pleasure and scholarship, possessed through travel, and owned by anyone willing to claim and defend that ownership. How is one to live in a way that does not cannibalize the lives of others, that does not reduce them to mascots, objects of fascination, mere terms in the logic of a dominant culture? Travel photography, travel writing, they have become dead terms, and he can't make them live. Or further down, who taught you that your rights are more important than other people's rights? The excuses made for the display of African bodies are familiar to him. Those excuses are sometimes blunt and unconvincing, and sometimes seductive. Everywhere in contemporary photography is the same old vampirism, but now it is smart enough to come with good wall text. So this topic is and has been with Teju Cole for quite some time. And yeah, I think it's simply with these references to photography, it's making us see things that weren't maybe that clear. And that's a very, well, cultural critical, important thing, right? I still have a few minutes and would like to touch upon my last example, namely that a lot of work is done when it comes to, yeah, what do we want to call it? Yeah, eco-criticism and ecology, environmentalism, right? So people are talking about eco-media, eco-ekphrasis, This is another great example how the research field of eco-criticism can, in a very productive way, be brought together with intermediality research. But we're only beginning to work on that. I think in film more is done, but with text it's not so much. So here is an example, Brune and Salmo's Intermedial Eco-Criticism. Very important book, but focusing very much on all kind of media, documentary, film, and not on texts. And so texts are my focus point, and I'm really interested in how novels do the thing and how poems do the thing. And maybe just one quote that I love, and Natalie, you know this quote already, you know, how do we make a connection between, yeah, intermediality and ecology? And in comes Amitav Ghosh, famous novelist, essayist. I'm sure you know him. He wrote this essay, The Great Derangement. And there he said, with the internet, we were suddenly back in a time when text and image could be twinned with such facility as in an illuminated manuscript. It is surely no coincidence that images too began to seep back into the textual world of the novel. Then came the rise of the graphic novel. So if it is the case that the last but perhaps most intransigent way of Anthropocene resists literary fiction lies ultimately in its resistance to language itself, then it would seem to follow that new hybrid forms will emerge. So, what hybrid forms have I been working on? That's Ekphrasis, I'm afraid. Again, Ekphrasis. And I brought along an example, and that's a very good example because it's so short. It's a short poem, and we have time to read it. It's from Margaret Atwood's latest collection of poems, Dearly. And it's poem number 4 from her Plasticine Suite that has this collection, Plasticine Suite, has 9 poems, and 2 of them are clearly ekphrastic. And I brought along this one, which is called Midway Island Albatross. Inside the barebone ribs, it's all bright color, a tag, a ribbon, a failed balloon, a strip of silver foil, a spring, a wheel, a coil. What should have been there inside the sad bag of wispy feathers, inside the dead bird child, it should have been the fuel for wings. It should have been upsoaring over a clean sea, not this glittering mess, this festering nestwork. Okay, so the title gives away why this is intermedial, right? It refers to this super famous series of Midway messages from the Dryer, Chris Jordan's series of photographs of these baby albatrosses, and he didn't change them. Yeah, they are unaltered pictures. He just took, it's documentary. Yeah, he insists and keeps repeating. So one example, what poetry can do, but what does poetry do in this poem? I mean, you know, we probably all at one point saw the photographs. And of course, we saw pictures on TV of the albatrosses, these baby albatrosses. But what Atwood can do with her medium, poetry, is to remind us, is to make us think about, to really show us these ugly facts and make us maybe also feel bad or raise the question of accountability. Also, yeah, it's memory work in a way in our media world that is so accelerated and going on to be even more accelerated all the time. So really important stuff that I think can be done in poems. I mean, we don't have the time to really look at the pattern. It's a wonderful list of objects, and if we think about, you know, yeah, there are not too many verbs. It's just a list. Maybe that also refers to image already because it's the static nouns. But anyway, that's an example. Another example would be a poem by Pascal Petit. She's Welsh French, and she wrote a poem on these elephants. It's another depressing poem. I'm sorry. So I have to wrap up because we don't have time, and I will go back, you know, but there will be a lecture on these ecology and intermediality questions with more examples today. I just wanted to kind of open the horizon, kind of do a tour d'horizon and tell you what I think is important or where it could be going. But this is not, you know, a conclusive list or anything. I'm sure you have great ideas and you work on exciting things. But yeah, all in all, I think it's we should tend to or think about these things that are so pressing and so political, ecology, And literature can do something. Yeah, it is performative. It is a mode of making us rethink. It's a mode of shifting epistemological frames. It's also something that can produce affect, I would say, and raises questions. That's all it can do. What can I say? The last sentence, it's as always wrong people reading literature. We read the literature, those who should read literature do not. And I don't know whether President Trump knows these wonderful embroideries, the Tiny Pricks project, but he wouldn't be amused. So I have to stop here because it's 6 o'clock and I hope you enjoyed it. And sorry for the hitches. I don't know, our two laptops don't like each other. We like each other, but the laptops don't. Thank you.
Are you okay taking a few questions before we?
Yeah, absolutely. If we, yeah.
Okay, just let me check on mine. So, do we have questions from the floor? Stefan?
Really fascinating, very, very stimulating. I mean, I was fascinated by all the topics that you raised about redefining the boundaries of intermediality. I was wondering about the points you made about and what you were saying towards the end of your presentation, and in the introduction, as that meant about intermediality, acting on reality, changing things. And you quoted Jacques Rancière in particular, you might find really very interesting. But it must be when Jacques Rancière also been criticized by some thinkers or theorists on the ground that he's accused people like Zizek, for instance, of remaining on the symbolic level. So idealizing conflict, but simply as a form of symbol, cultural events, or and so I was wondering if you think that intermediality can help act on people's politics beyond what they feel. I mean, can it lead to organized action beyond just the sensation, or beyond, say, the visibility? We're talking quite right now, I think, about making invisible things visible. But beyond that, is it possible to, or do you think intermediality to lead to some form of coordinated political action that would change the economic, social, and political structures? Because I find the difficulty. People can let's say, can feel a form of communion, or experience a type of revelation when they see something that hasn't been seen, or they're made to see something that hasn't been seen so far. How can it lead to political agreement or organized activism, say, for instance?
Yeah, good question, Stefan. I mean, literature, intermediality, I think intermediate literature can make us see things and can maybe, even affect us. But the next step would be activism. And I don't think intermediality will do that. I mean, that would be us who have, learned certain things, getting together. And I mean, there is all this literature now about the public intellectual. We should all be public intellectuals. That is Butler, or Levine just published this book, The Activist Scholar, I think. Is it The Activist something in the title? And I mean, they are trying to convince us this literature, reading literature, can actually do that. But I cannot see how it will bring us together, in the sense of, I mean, maybe the book club people, the 10 people in a room discussing novels, but us as readers, you know, as a general public, I think this step is difficult. And I have to say that my university would be very allergic, and the Swiss National Science Foundation, if we turned into activists, because science and scholarship should not be biased and do certain things. It should be scientific. So this is a huge debate, and it's really important. But you know, I think the symbolic is already very important. But it would need more. It would need us to want to get together and become activists, which would lead us into trouble in some places.
Well, we'll be able to talk about it much more, but just there's that book that's just been published by Myriam Revaud-Dallon. Myriam Revaud-Dallon, but Passion publique, and so what she tries to do is to say that there's often been a separation between politics and sensibility or sentiment. And what she said, that, well, we should try and reconcile the two, and that
interesting, yeah.
Things should be an engine for, and so it should no longer be considered as suspicious, dangerous, you know.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, there's also lots of research. We are also passionate creatures as scholars, but this step to activism. But I look it up. Thank you very much, Stefan, for the reference. I don't know the book, but is it in English?
That's not quite yet.
Not quite yet. Okay, so we wait a little. Okay, I'll put it, excerpts into certain machines who might give a summary.
Nice way of pushing it. Okay, do we have more questions? Martinella.
Very interesting in what you said about songwriting and the idea of effect. I was thinking, because I'm working on a trial of my chalet Rumbles in Germany too, and it uses Ekphrasis a lot to describe, of course, the landscape, and also for art, visual arts, and it has a political end as well. So I was trying to say, I tried to use some of the bibliography. I asked you more about it, and I was wondering about this idea of affect. So should I explore if at some point she uses particular descriptions or works of art to promote her own idea of the Italian revolutions, because the whole work is supposed also to be in favor of that. So I'd be very interested to read more and to check some of the books that you suggest.
Yeah, but was that a direct question?
Yeah, the question in the sense, I wonder whether you think this is possible, that I can search this kind of combination in a 19th century work that was published in 1844. So, you know, I wonder whether intermediality can have, you know, that role that you say, you can use affect to transmit this message.
Yeah, I should think so. I mean, they were maybe more revolutionary times than ours, or in our countries. Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, I think affect, you know, since classical antiquity, is such an important ingredient when it comes to intermedial constellations, and so I don't see why not, especially, you know, this kind of romanticism. I mean, they were all interested in that, and I would be, I would certainly support that you look, you know, what does the text produce by going via images or descriptions, also maybe descriptions of landscape, not only of paintings, but yeah, absolutely. Great project.
Okay, thank you, Antonina. Do we have more questions? John?
It's not a theoretical question by any means, very practical question. Working with intermediality as a literary scholar, I would quote from a poem, a novel, etc., without need permission from the author, as long as I remain within my 10% of the text. As soon as we enter intermediality, we're bringing in photographs, we're bringing in artwork, permission is needed, permission costs money. How do we get around this? I'm being faced with this all the time now in the comic studies that I'm doing. So why can't an image or a photograph be taken as a word, since we're treating it as a word in our studies, and say, I have the right to quote a word without paying the author or their estate? Why can't I use, if it's for research, an illustration or a photograph without seeking permission? You've come across this without a doubt in your work. How do you get around that?
Well, yeah, it's a question of money, right? And a question of American lawyers and a question of publishing houses, because decent ones let you quote an image, right? Like a word. But what I sometimes do is simply, you know, give an internet link where the pictures are online.
That's exciting, though, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's not, because readers have to click, right? But it can't be solved, because there will always be people who want to save money. Even quoting from a poem, one word could be very expensive these days. If they are not, 70 years dead or so, 70 years after. So I can't help you, John. I'm suffering from the same thing with graphic novels. Yeah. We could become activists here. We could become activists. We had to have a lot of affect, and we're not pleased by the rules. But it's, you know, if the lawyers are at it, yeah. I don't have a better answer.
Okay, Gabby, do you want to take more questions, or do you want to move on to the seminar? Because
I know that some people need to leave, I suppose. So we could have.
We have the other hour. You know?
We have we can
7,
go on.
so
Yeah,
go.
yeah. I mean, I thought, you know, this overview might be a bit dry, and so I haven't prepared another talk for the second hour, but I wanted to really have a bit of an exchange what you're interested in. I mean, I would be interested whether you still discuss things like transmediality. What's your take here in IDEA? What's your take? Do you think these discussions of boundaries, media boundaries, are productive? Do they help? What are your projects? Now, we focused a lot on affect, which is great, but there are also a few other fields that we could touch upon. I would be interested whether somebody works on, you know, these political aspects. We have documentaries here. We have travelogues. Highly quested, fields, and documentaries. I'm sure Tejuko would have, he would say something about it, like about photography, travelogues, etc. But music. I don't know a lot about music. That's the thing.
We're talking about music on Thursday with our doctoral seminar.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay, and I also wanted to ask you what your projects are. So what would you like to do? Where shall we start?
And people online, you're more than welcome to ask questions as well and contribute. I know Gabby has a presentation as well for the seminar part, which we can launch, or we can continue the discussion. It's up to you, based on the early presentation.
The debate between I know Diane is online. We have our intermediality journey d'études for the undergrad students at the end of the month. And one of the issues that I'm working on, as you mentioned there, was the difference between intermediality and third mediality. I'm doing meta-mediality as well. We had this discussion 20 years ago or 15 years ago with IDEA. I mean, the difference between interdiscipline, transdiscipline, pluridiscipline. Yeah. It's these damn prefixes that just keep screwing things up.
Yes, so would you say that Rajewski is right in saying we're a bit tired of these typology and rather look into examples and try to really describe the examples, analyze what they do, what people do, describe them, analyze them. Is that the trend?
Can you think of an example in your own research where the topic could be considered either trans, inter, or plur, or all three at the same time, and you don't quite know where to fit the square hole into the round egg type of stuff?
Yeah. Oh, that's a difficult one because I'm a text scholar, so I don't so easily, think about transmediality where all boundaries are gone. But would maybe a theater piece, which is multi or plurimedial, and stages videos of graphics, of graphic novels in the background, it would be in several categories. But if you filmed that on top and showed it also on the stage, then it would be also trans, right? Because there would be the one big media that encompasses it all. And I think such theater pieces exist. But yeah, maybe somebody else has an example of that. And did you say meta-mediality? And what would that be? Maybe.
That's kind of what I'm working on right now. I mean, I've got 10 days to figure that out.
So Diane, this is Diane Leblond.
I'm showing Gabby the program.
Yeah, I see the program. Mark Twain.
30th of January.
Yeah. Yeah, this is cutting edge, guys. Yeah. So Diane, do you want to give an example from your work, from what you're working on? Meta-mediality, hang on.
So I'm not technically working on meta-mediality. I'm organizing the day symposium, and I guess the part of the idea behind that symposium has to do more with, there's a meta dimension to it, but it has more to do with the gradual integration of intermedial studies into what you might consider as the sort of strongholds of certain conservatism, disciplinary conservatism in the French tradition, which are the concours d'enseignement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of the way this came to be is that our master's programs they're connected in Nancy and in Metz, but here in Metz we have the specificity of we focus specifically on intermediate studies, which is why a number of our master's students are connected today and will be following your interventions with in great detail and with great interest. And because we tend to focus on matters of intermediality across the disciplines of anglistique, I was interested to see how sort of research connected or intersected with didactics in the French tradition, because you would assume the concours, and in this case the agrégation, to be the last bastion of, disciplines need to be separate. There are different ways to apprehend things and so on. And even in the case of the agrégation, every year for, I think, close to 20 years now, there have been at least one element of the syllabus that has to do with a literary text being connected with a film, and there yes, and the last reform of the concours basically introduced the notion of looking at texts and images together as part of the oral. So I kind of wanted to see how colleagues who partly work on intermediality but are now also teaching these questions for the preparation to the agrégation, how they perceived that tension between intermediality within research and the practice of intermediality as something that is necessarily kind of interdisciplinary, and how that kind of ends up imposing itself even in places where you would expect the most resistance to be met. Sorry, that was a very long-winded response.
Yeah, no, but very interesting for me. So concours is not just the curriculum, but also the disciplines, to get training for a discipline. And you're very advanced because you already have in the books that there need to be intermediate examples, right? Like adaptation of a text into a film or whatever. We don't even have that. But the didactic question and also the questions of methodology, how we teach is, I think that's a big box of worms, because students need to have 2 literacies or 3 literacies, yeah. And that's quite a challenge to achieve. And I think, you know, in our classes, literature classes, we do not enough really systematically teaching how to analyze an image. Unless you have students in the room who are from art history or film studies, who are experts, get the training, it's not there, this competence. And I don't know, I've always tried to convince people like Werner Wolf to write a book on intermediate methodology, but nobody wants to do it. I don't want to do it. But it would really be, you know, because, yeah, how to read images, you get, you know, how to read visual artifacts. You have these books, but really for us, I think it does not exist. Still, Natalie, that would be work for you here.
Put that on my list.
Yeah, all these specialists here. I mean, you're much more advanced than we are. Intermediality is not in our curriculum at all. We're doing it, but yeah, it's not there. But since we are hearing about projects, and I would be so interested in other projects, the doctoral students. I asked Natalie whether I will see some of you. But I think the colloquia take place every 4 weeks, so there will be one on music.
Doctoral students
yes.
in the room. We have
yes.
quite a few of
Don't
them.
you want to tell us a bit about, does any of this, what I said, make sense? Or do you see completely different fields of intermediality research? In the sense, of course, there are important fields I don't see, because I have a certain field I'm working on. But what do the young people in the room do?
And online as well.
And online as well. We know about Diane, but there are more people. Who would like to tell us a bit about their research?
Esther?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So many of which have been intermediality.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with it. I think it's future research.
Yeah. So are you working with adaptation theory more?
literature and the movement and from especially.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
I think it's something that we're confronted with more and more. I teach research methodologies at the undergraduate level, and over the last 10 years or more, we can see the paradigm shifting to visual studies.
Yeah.
Moving away from textual studies entirely.
Mhm.
I don't want to stop it. I don't want to force students, no, go back to Shakespeare, go back to Milton, get away from these TV series. As long as you treat the TV series like you would treat Shakespeare, I have no problem with it. It's just the younger crowd tends to fall into the fandom and they move away from the scientific side of it.
Yeah.
And then we get a celebration of it more so than an actual study of it. I think that's one of the risks, and maybe MES has that more than we do at the master level because we don't have intermediate studies as part of our program. But how do you convince students that your topic is fine, even if it is a popular topic, as long as you recognize how to step back from it? And I don't know if introducing intermediate studies theory is going to help with that, or if that's just going to bore them and leave out. You're destroying my favorite TV series. What, get away from us, you adult academic people, and let us have fun. I don't know. I'm worried. I mean, I'm going to be retiring not too long, so I'm not that worried. But the future is kind of scary in research when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, after 10 years, for the first time, last term, I taught a BA seminar, and I have to say that we also did nostalgic, Mad Men. It was a seminar on nostalgia and intermediality, if you like. But, we had to preach. It's not just the what. We're interested in the how. How does a medium bring nostalgia across? How is it done? And this how is already a big problem. They don't know how to do that. And then I would go on and ask, but why is that done? And that's even a bigger problem. Yeah. Why is something set in the 60s? Why is that nostalgic? Why? What are the functions? What does it do for us today? Why are certain series so successful right now? What do they give us? What do they say about our culture? So this analyzing the media and the genres, because we've learned with Shklovsky, no content comes without form, and we would add media as intermediate scholars. So that's lost, and I also, like you, worry a lot.
Interestingly, John's question raises the question of affects that you started with, right?
Yeah. The affect also of us scholars, of teachers. Yeah.
Going around the doctoral students, and only one spoke so far. And I don't want to force you into this, but Claudine is having. No, you don't want to talk about your project, which is intermedial, and John raised the question of rights. Next time. Okay, next time.
Okay.
But okay, Daniela works on text and image. Pauline works on text, but in the rewriting of myths, not really intermedial. Dorian is hiding, but she works on intermedial issues as well. And online Louis as well, right? Between literature and linguistics. Am I forgetting anyone? Because I'm not seeing everybody's. Louis, I saw you. Do any of you want to say anything about your research and your struggles, perhaps, with intermediality? I know, Daniela, you're struggling with text and image, trying to find your way into this.
Illustrated novels for readers and the interviewer, and I'm interested in how images obscure or maybe highlight fearful objects in the book or the feelings of the characters. And I think the theory of the effect will be helpful here. And I'm also interested, but I'm not sure yet if it's something that should be really included in my thesis, but I'm interested in how illustrations can vary or appear or disappear from one edition to another, and whether this changes the target readers, the group shared by the publisher, but also in how publishing houses use different medias for their promotional activities, like doing book trailers, for example, of graphic novels, and yeah. So
you're working on the why, which is good. The how and the why.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's for the thesis itself or just for myself, because I don't understand this.
Yeah, interesting to see what you find out also, you know, what happens from edition to edition. Yeah. And why are they there, the pictures, and why not? And then link that to fear. Yeah, the visualization, very produces, I think, even more affect. Yeah, it's a bit like melodrama. You have the text, and then you have the crying heroine, and then the text says she's crying now, and this semiotic excess maybe. But yeah, this shift away from the text, you know, in my American studies, I don't know, Andre, whether you agree with me, the Americanists are very keen on visual studies. You know, they work on photographs. If photographs in newspapers or anywhere never came with text, which is simply not true. Photographs very often, like the example here, this is a not modified image of an albatross, he says. Well, yeah, and they are so keen on visual studies. You mentioned that, John, but I think it's not correct, because yeah, it's this, the media come together, text, image, music, it's all there. So I think for me that's a no-go, but in American studies it's super big, at least, yeah, in Germany it's super big. Yeah, also in Switzerland, visual studies. But we don't live in an exclusively visual world, even if this medium is very prominent. But that's why I also liked so much Malaika's work, you know, this textile, working on quilts, yeah. And these questions, you know, are there borderline cases? What is an ekphrasis? Is this really just artwork, or can it be an abstract quilt that's described like as if it were a Renaissance painting, right? So, but also this tactility, and yeah, and maybe the textile is more immersive, maybe if we work with cloths, or not as immersive as certain digital media, obviously, but yeah, I mean, I also wonder, if I may ask, I don't know, Andre, do you want to say something? You're not young. I'm not young either. So let's ask Stephen in his field, Stefan, in your field. History of ideas, I take it, yeah? I recently was on a committee that gave out stipends, and there was a young history of ideas person, and he talked about discourses and history. And I kept saying, but I'm sure you also must work with visual material. No, I just want to go to Oxford and work with text. I said, but that's not possible. I mean, how is your field doing with, you know, how do you work?
I must say, I focus on text essentially, but it's true I'm permanently confronted with the visual arts. I'm always under the impression that there's more, let's see, can I say it bluntly, the impression there's more substance or more content in the text, depending on of course, the depth of the text. We have very superficial text in our productions. But then when I see that some even classical texts are subject to so many different interpretations, then I find that there's a lot in common with the visual arts, where you can have a diversity of perceptions of one same picture, one same photograph.
Yeah, so they are both polysemantic, complex, products.
But then I'm also, interested in those political illustrations or
Sure.
how meaning grows out or outgrows the intention or the first message, and that's where you reach. I mean, literary conception or aesthetic conceptions that the history of ideas in itself tends to want to avoid. So yeah, I think there are lots of convergences. It's a question of multiple interpretations, definitely. And I was also thinking about what you were saying. Isn't there something about which you find also nature of ideas? Isn't there something in intermediality about trying to reappropriate meaning or symbol, trying to with the idea that a straightforward picture or a straightforward song, in fact, can be subject to different meanings. So you need to have different layers of interpretation and different ways of prolonging meaning. Isn't that something about intermediarity that I perceive about trying to recapture or reappropriate symbol? I don't know if that's your impression.
Reappropriate or simply carve out things with this intermedial perspective that you would not see if you had different goggles on, or appropriation or capturing things is maybe a strong word, but
there's something creative, isn't there, about it as well, I suppose, in the intermediate approach to that. It's not just looking at, but it's also creating something, or
but every interpretation would be any reading of a text would also be creative, right? Because we interpret, and what we bring to the text makes a big difference, whether we see, for instance, also intertextual references, whether we see them and spot them at all, or whether we don't.
But in a way, this is, we may call this second-hand interpretation, right? I think what Stefan is thinking about is more the first-hand, right? Creative process of a new product. Am I right?
So the making of.
Okay. Yeah, but we haven't finished going around the doctoral students and all colleagues. We have colleagues specialized in, intermediate subjects. But Stefan has a doctoral student who works. She's not here today. You might see her on Thursday. Who works on Cruikshank, the artist, but she works on him not from the history of idea perspective, right? And the intellectual man behind the artist. So she works on intermediate objects as well. Dorian does as well, her work on Wild, and Louis, who's online, his work on Melville. So I don't know if I don't want to force anybody's hand, but or our master students as well, some of them, all students work on intermediate objects. If you want to, step into the discussions, you're more than welcome. Louis?
Linguistics.
Yes, I can, but well, I'm working on Herman Melville's seafaring or sailing narratives. so novels, short stories, and novellas. I'm using them as a textual environment for observing, well, what we call spatial dialectics, so context dependent terms like here, there, yonder, hither, thither, but also more specific interjections, sorry, like ahoy, sail ho, or land ho, for signaling well, specific objects appearing. So the point of my thesis is trying to grasp this framing, targeting dynamics for both the diegetic space, so the place where the places where the story takes place, and the discursive or textual space of the narrator. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure we can talk of an intermedial project, more of an interdisciplinary project, but that's what I do.
Interesting. And Louis, do you work with, digital means like distant reading, kind of mining texts with machines, computer?
Well, I'm using softwares like Wordsmith or Enconc for observing my corpus and trying to get statistics and quantitative data.
And do you already have a hypothesis what the mining process or the analysis will yield?
Not really at this point. Not really. I don't have a specific hypothesis for the quantitative dimension of my project, but I hope that it'll help to better grasp the dynamics of English as both specializing and specialized language.
We have just started within this first year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How interesting, because in new theories of description, this data mining, this collecting data is super important, and description is discussed under this label. Description is just one mode of collecting data. And the idea is that literary studies should do more of that, instead of, looking always for the symbolic or for the, what does a text mean? It kind of, there's a plea to do surface reading, to really see, a rose as a rose and not a red rose as a symbol for love. So these are new ideas, and they would come in handy maybe also for you.
Sure. Why
this data collection now? And one of the theoreticians I will talk about next week is Hauser, and she has this argument, maybe it's too simple, but everything is now digital and fleeting, and so we need this approach of collecting data and have something to hold on to. But yeah, everything is in flux. I mean,
Gary, I know you had prepped another presentation.
No. It's not really a presentation. I just have, questions that I thought might interest you, might interest me. But I think we touched upon quite a few, John. I don't know whether you're interested in these topics. I'm interested in, but yeah.
I'd like to take on this one, that intermediate studies privileges the able-bodied.
The able-bodied.
In the sense of
Yeah.
blind or or deaf readers.
Mm.
I had an interesting experience a couple of weeks ago. So studies in comics out of Taylor Francis is going to publish an article of mine, which has images. They allowed images without any permission whatsoever, but they asked me to do sort of the Ekphrasis on each of the images because they said we have disabled readers.
Mm.
And I was suddenly confronted with I had never actually done that before.
Mm.
How do I make a photograph or an image that I'm using in my analysis clear enough to someone who can't see it?
Yeah. That's a big field, but usually the machines do it. And I was at a meeting with a publishing house with De Gruyter the other day, De Gruyter Brell, and suddenly it occurred to me and I said, gosh, Ekphrasis scholars like me, we have lots of work in the future because all the machines describe now the images for blind readers, right? So Ekphrasis are produced by the minute, floods of them. We're flooded by them in the future because
we studied what those machines have written.
No, but it's so interesting. You know, I think that will be a research field because, yeah, we also have to check our texts. Yeah, when we have pictures and we publish them, we have to check what these machines produce. Nice that you were asked to do the Ekphrasis yourself, but I'm afraid the machines will go on. Well, we'll do it in the future. Super interesting, and will the blind, you know, it's always the question, will you be able to imagine the picture then when you read any of the descriptions, right?
This reminds me of a classroom experience. Remember, a few years ago, we had quite a few blind students in our classes. And some of us teach image material in class. And I remember having the other students in class describing the visual material there was Patrick and there were, I forgot the names of the others. And it occurred to me that we're not trained for that. And I realized that we keep using expressions like, you see, as you can see, and no, but the guy, it was really motivating. Remember Patrick? Some of you? And yeah, I remember either describing myself or having the other students in the class describe from their different perspectives, and he was okay with that. That worked for him.
So we have reader response criticism. Do we have visual response criticism?
Yeah.
That exists.
Yeah. We just have this old saying that a picture says more than an image says more than 1,000 words. Yeah. So everybody describes a picture differently and everybody visualizes. Blind people will visualize them differently. And yeah, that's a big difference.
You're right. Yeah. That should be a field of study, you know?
Yeah, maybe it will, but then people are not so interested in text. If John's prognosis is correct, you know, that text will disappear more and more, like we're getting retired and the young people do the important work on all these exciting cultural phenomena and products or whatever we want to call them, artifacts that are being produced, right? Yeah, and that we all watch series nonstop, and we also read novels still, but yeah.
Okay, Adriana?
So I have a question about the idea of boundaries. Because I worked a lot on Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, which has text and pictures. And one of the main ideas of Walter Evans, the photographer, is essentially to say that he doesn't want any text with his photographs. And every time he has the opportunity to not have text with his photographs, he doesn't. And this is why when you said, you know, images are published with text, well, sometimes they're not because the photographers don't want to. And around Evans, there were also other photographers who actively resisted words. And in this book, the writer who worked with him was also very keen on not overstepping, his bounds. And he never describes any of the pictures that are included. He doesn't describe things that are in the photographs. He doesn't mention the photographs themselves. And so you have a book that is intermedial, but with a very clear, sharp boundary between the two medias. And yet it's one of the most intermedial experiences I've ever had reading a book. So as someone who is a text scholar and who works on Ekphrasis, I wanted to hear your thoughts, because you mentioned this idea of, boundaries being one of the avenues in intermediate study. So what do you, as a person who is a text scholar, think about these cases where there is a resistance on part of photographers, surrounding words, photographers resisting words and wanting photographs to speak for themselves? And how do you feel about that? Is this something you've encountered in your research and perhaps in other works? And
yeah, I mean, it's paragonal gestures, maybe, to establish the image. Like I can speak for myself. When I said pictures usually come up with words, I was also thinking of newspapers and, political photographs. But yeah, I mean, this is modernism. And this was much about Greenberg, the art historian, this purism or like Tom Mitchell, who says picture theory. So pictures can even do theory without words, defending the picture. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think I agree with Rajewski that we shouldn't essentialize boundaries too much, especially now when the things come together always, and when there is the computer that kind of adds a completely new level. But I think Rajewski is also right. Without this heuristic idea of the boundary, we wouldn't kind of get the results that, wouldn't be that rich. So the boundary allows us also to see, the great combination, or what crossover features are. So, and I think it's also important to historicize, simply, to see, what's the context, why now, why at that time, and how media were kind of, defined. Yeah, but wonderful that you brought up this example. I really love it too. It's just great. Documentary also.
I have a follow-up question. But
Yes.
Sure, after you.
Yes.
So when you say that, like in the text overalls, and then in the photograph, the overalls, do you know whether the photograph was first and then AG writes about the overalls, or does AG write the overalls and then the person thinks, I'm going to go and get it? If that is the case, then there is a text there.
we don't know for sure, because he rewrote the text over and over and over again. I think he rewrote it more than 5 times over 5 years. So we don't have the traces of when, each specific passage was written. But if I had to guess, I would think that the photographs were taken first, because we know for sure that they were taken in 1936, whereas the text probably was written anywhere from 1936 to 1941.
So it's AG who added the text.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things about that is that the usual relationship between text and pictures is inverted in this book. Because usually in the hierarchy, the text is above the pictures. The text contains more information, it gives more things, and we rely on the text more to explain the pictures. And the boundary specifically is there to prevent that and to make the pictures more prominent than the text. And he really respects that, as I said, by not, he doesn't reference. So yes, there's a man in overalls in the pictures. There's also a description of the overalls in the text, but they don't correspond. And you can't, put one next to the other and,
Draw lines.
Draw lines. Yeah,
Exactly. So the image, the photograph is not just an illustration. So fighting for the image. Yeah.
Trying to fight for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So a similar project, maybe like Coles, Teju Coles.
As you know, illustration, you know, in books face the reverse issue of boundaries and resistance, you said, Diana, with writers refusing illustration altogether, James and others saying, no picture in my text, absolutely not, there's no way. So an interesting reversal of objects, you know.
Yeah. And in your examples, I mean, are there the authors themselves maybe deciding this edition will have images, the next one not?
So I worked on Coraline during my master's. I'm not working on it now, but I know that Gaiman had a long collaboration with 2 illustrators. But I was really surprised to find out that there is actually an edition of Coraline with no illustration and where the cover image is completely different and it's actually photography and not at all the same type of image that it's used on the other 2. So I'm not sure if they're the ones who decide. Probably for the authors that are well known, they might do. But for others which are not big names, that maybe they don't. I haven't looked at that. But I know it's also depending on whether it's a paperback edition.
Sure.
Hardback.
The price. Yeah, how to sell it, how many copies, at what price. Yeah.
Ask me a question I didn't ask.
Yes, Andre.
I'll ask you a question. Why do we need intermediality? I mean, what does the field, the theory that accompanies it, what does it add to an already existing cultural field of, she mentioned Let's Not Raise Feminist. I read Let's Not Raise Feminist many, many years ago. And I could see that it was doing something about the relationship between text and images. I didn't have the concept of intermediality then, but I think I understood what the book was doing. And I was looking at that book within the context of a field, American Studies, since you asked me about that, which itself incorporated a variety of objects from different domains and disciplines, history, sociology, art history, literature, geography, you name it. The field that grew in the 1930s, developed after World War II in the United States and was exported to Europe. It exists in France, Études américaines, which is the translation of American studies, in a slightly different form because on one hand you have literary studies, on the other you have something called civilization, which is the heir really of that interdisciplinary field, which I think in Germany called it Landeskunde. And so I'm really asking the question. I've been doing this kind of work. I've been putting things together from a variety of fields. Film is one that I could mention. And I've done some reading in the theory of intermediality, and I failed to see what it brings me to what I think I am already doing and what I think, ambitiously perhaps, that I know. So basically the question is, what do theories of intermediality contribute to our understanding of phenomena that do not, that go back decades, if not centuries. When you were talking about the relationship between literature and the arts, I was thinking of Joseph Conrad. Back then, I was even further back, I was thinking of the great writers of the American Renaissance. Fascination with the connection between word and image, between literature and the visual arts. And again, when I studied them, I didn't have intermediality, but I could see that that's what they were doing in their work. So what are you bringing me, selfishly?
Yes.
That will help me open my horizon and cleanse my eyes.
Okay, that's a good final question, maybe.
It will be the last one.
Okay. Well, I think one way to answer the question is that at a certain time, suddenly, there was a really great production of novels that suddenly had photographs. So I think with the cultural products that are out there, it was kind of, the thing to do, to read literature next to. Now, American studies, one has to say, has always been visual. It included, American studies was open to film, was open to, when you compare it to a traditional English department, say in England or even on the continent, English study was never so open as American studies. So I would say from a historical point of view, it was clear that people had to think about how to approach these new things more. I mean, they were always there. There were examples, but there was a time when suddenly there was more on the market, like also Ekphrasis. I also think that, talking about linguistics and Saussure's kind of way of thinking about language and maybe also about different media, it was always the significat that was important, and not so much, the thing that carries the linguistic sign. And I think that also added to the debate of the role of the signifiant, the medium, the carrier. And so at a certain point, these things came together. And I think that triggered the intermediality theory. And I think it's great for charting the field, just getting an idea what kind of, it's so different, so many different examples. It helps us to understand, and there will be new categories. But American studies, I think also should go more down the lane of intermediality, even if they do cinema, but they very often do visual culture. That would be my maybe not so brilliant answer, but I would come from a historical, and from the market, what's out there, what do people produce? And then suddenly it's so much, and then people get interested.
So we end on this tricky question and very brave answer. Okay, Gabriele, thank you so much for this introductory lecture and first, discussion with the colleagues and then students. We are very grateful to you for this. So please join me in thanking Gabby.
I thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the colleagues and students online who've put up with our technical issues. Thanks for your patience and thank you for being here. So we'll be meeting again next Tuesday here in Nancy. And then after that, we'll be in Metz on, help me, the 4th. I forgot, early February, and then one more time here in Nancy. But you have, all the program in your mailboxes, and I will keep sending reminders. A great many thanks again to all of you for your questions, contributions online, on site. And we wish you a nice evening and we'll see you again next week. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.